The afternoon sun is so bright it turns the lake into a sheet of silver. A soft wind moves through the trees, carrying the smell of pine and warm earth. On the dock, two white cops in uniform walk side by side, their heavy boots making the old boards creak. Between them is a young black woman, her wrists locked in handcuffs that bite into her skin. She looks around, eyes searching the quiet shore, hoping to find someone who might help. There's no one. The taller cop grips her arm tighter, leaving pale marks. The water below is calm, dark blue, almost beautiful. "You can't do this," she says, voice shaking but steady enough to carry. The shorter one smirks. "No one's here to see, sweetheart." They push her to the edge. The smell of lake water rises up. One bends down like he's checking the cuffs, but his hand presses hard on her shoulder. She twists away, but the other cop moves behind her. A gull cries overhead. Then they shove her into the water. She breaks the surface once, hair clinging to her face. "Help me," she gasps. The tall cop plants his boot on her shoulder and pushes her under. The splash fades to ripples. The dock groans under their weight as they stand still, watching the water smooth over as if nothing happened. Somewhere far off, a boat engine hums, unaware of what has just been stolen from the world. The lake, shining and quiet, holds her now. Marcus was halfway through his shift at the Coast Guard station when his phone started buzzing in his locker. The sound cut through the background noise of tools clanking and low voices. At first, he thought it was just another scheduling call, but something about the way it wouldn't stop made him answer. On the other end, a neighbor's voice came in fast and broken. "They took her, 2 cops, they drowned her in the lake." Marcus froze, gripping the edge of the bench, staring at the floor as the words sank in. He asked the neighbor to repeat it, not because he didn't hear, but because he couldn't believe it. The same words came again, heavier this time. His mind filled with the image of his sister's face under the water, sunlight hitting her hair like it always did when she waited for him after his dives. Within minutes, he was in his truck, a half-zipped duffel bag thrown in the back. The road blurred past, trees, fields, small towns, but all he could think about was her. When he pulled into his mother's driveway, she was already at the door. Her face was pale, her hands gripping the frame. "They said she resisted arrest, that she slipped," she said. Marcus shook his head, his voice low and sharp. "They're lying." That night, he lay in his old bed, staring at the ceiling. The hum of a car outside, a dog barking in the distance, the quiet of a town pretending nothing happened. He knew the truth, no one here would bring justice. If it was going to happen, it would have to be him. The fishing dock was quiet except for the soft slap of water against the posts. Dale Cormac stood near the edge, a half-cleaned fish on the board beside him, a beer can sweating in the sun. He hummed to himself, thinking he was alone. Beneath the dock, Marcus moved through the dark water in his black wetsuit, every motion slow and silent. He surfaced without a sound, the glare of daylight breaking over his head. In one quick move, he grabbed Dale's ankles and yanked hard, sending him crashing to his knees before pulling him into the lake. The splash was sharp, then muffled as the water closed over them. Dale thrashed, kicking and clawing, but Marcus locked an arm around his chest, forcing them both deeper into the cold. The man's shouts turned to a rush of bubbles, his movements growing frantic, then slower. Marcus held him there, feeling the fight drain away. When the body went limp, he let it sink, the weight pulling it into the shadows below. Marcus broke the surface alone, breathing steady, water streaming from his suit. He climbed onto the dock, picked up the knife Dale had dropped, and tossed it into the cooler with the fish. For a moment, he looked out at the rippling water. The dock was warm under his hands, but the air around him felt cold. One debt was paid. Many more waited. The courthouse steps were bright under the midday sun, the pale stone almost too white to look at. Sheriff Pike stood at the top, tan uniform pressed, sunglasses hiding his eyes, speaking to a crowd of reporters gathered below. Marcus watched from the shade across the street, leaning against a brick wall. Pike's voice was steady, almost calm, as he called Dale Cormac's death an unfortunate accident and said there was no reason to believe foul play was involved. The words felt hollow, like he was reading from a script he'd used before. When a young reporter tried to press him about an eyewitness, Pike cut her off with a raised hand and a small, tight smile. Marcus could read the message. It wasn't just about avoiding questions, it was about reminding everyone who really controlled this town. The deputies standing nearby didn't need to move, the silence Pike carried was enough to make people back down. From where Marcus stood, it was clear the rot went higher than the men who had put his sister in the water. Pike wasn't just protecting them. He was part of it. Marcus stayed in the shade, watching until the sheriff stepped back inside the courthouse. In that moment, Marcus knew this wasn't over. If the law was going to keep their heads above water, then he would be the one to drag them under. Leon Bales lay stretched out on a small fishing boat in the middle of the reservoir, one arm over his eyes, the other holding a can of beer. A radio beside him played a slow country song, its sound carrying softly over the water. From the tree line, Marcus watched, still and patient, his dive gear ready at his feet. He waited until the boat drifted toward deeper water, far from the shore, before slipping into the lake without a splash. The cool weight closed over him as he swam under the surface, his eyes fixed on the shadow of the hull above. He reached the rope anchoring the boat and cut it clean with his dive knife. The boat began to drift freely. Moving to the far side, Marcus pulled himself over the edge in one smooth motion. Leon started to sit up, confused by the sudden shadow over him, but Marcus had already looped a length of steel cable around his ankle. One hard pull, and Leon tumbled overboard, hitting the water with a sharp splash. The cable went tight, dragging him down. His legs kicked wildly, arms breaking the surface for a moment before disappearing again. Marcus watched without speaking, the foam spreading, then breaking apart. Soon the water was still, the cable swaying gently beneath the surface. Marcus unclipped it, letting the weight sink out of sight, then climbed back onto the boat. The radio kept playing as if nothing had happened. He started the engine and headed for shore, the hum of the motor steady against the quiet. Another name was gone from the list. The town felt different now. Conversations in the cafe were quieter, the clink of cups louder without the usual chatter. At the barber shop, men lingered in their chairs after their haircuts, talking in low voices and glancing toward the door. Marcus could feel eyes on him wherever he went, not with open suspicion, but with a kind of quiet awareness. At the hardware store, an old friend of his father caught his arm near the rope aisle. "I heard about Cormac," the man said in a low tone. "And Bales." There was no anger in his voice, only something that sounded like respect, maybe even relief. Marcus didn't reply. He set the rope he'd been holding back on the shelf and walked out. That night, he stood at the lake where his sister had died. The water was still, the air filled with the soft chirp of crickets. As he turned to leave, an older woman stepped out from the shadows between two buildings. Her gray hair was tied back, her eyes fixed on him. "I know what you're doing," she said quietly. She didn't threaten him, didn't ask questions. She just added, "Be careful. They'll watch you harder." Before he could speak, she stepped back into the darkness and was gone. Judge Barrett's lake house sat behind tall hedges, the sound of laughter and clinking glasses drifting across the lawn. The judge stood near the grill in a crisp white shirt, telling a story that made the guests around him laugh on cue. From the cover of the trees, Marcus watched, patient and still. His eyes followed the long wooden dock stretching into the water, stopping on one plank in the middle that was already warped with age. When a pair of guests wandered back toward the house, Marcus moved. His steps across the grass were slow and steady, blending into the background noise of the gathering. On the dock, he crouched and slid a crowbar under the warped board, prying it just enough to weaken it. The wood groaned softly, hidden under the sizzle of meat on the grill. Moments later, Barrett strolled toward the dock with a drink in hand, pausing to take in the view like a man who believed nothing could touch him here. Halfway down, his boot hit the weakened plank. It cracked, and he plunged into the lake with a splash that turned every head. Guests rushed to the edge, shouting and leaning over. In the chaos, Marcus stepped forward, his hand brushing the judge's shoulder before pushing him back under. The struggle lasted only seconds. By the time someone shouted for a rope, Barrett had slipped beneath the surface. The search began, frantic and clumsy, but Marcus was already walking back across the lawn, his face calm, his pace unhurried. The lakeside park was crowded for the press event, the summer heat pressing down on everyone. Sheriff Pike stood at the edge of the dock behind a small podium, the county seal hanging from the front. 2 deputies flanked him while cameras pointed straight at his face. He spoke in that steady, practiced voice, talking about safety and community trust, saying the recent deaths were unfortunate accidents. From the shade of a cottonwood tree near the boat launch, Marcus listened, every word confirming what he already knew. Pike was still trying to control the story. Moving along the side of the crowd, Marcus kept low until he was under the dock. Above him, the shuffle of feet and creak of wood mixed with the sheriff's voice. In his hand, Marcus held a short length of rope, the loop already tied. When Pike stepped close enough, Marcus slipped the loop over one of his polished boots and pulled. The sheriff's words cut off with a gasp as he pitched forward into the water, the splash silencing the crowd. People rushed to the edge, shouting and pointing. Pike came up once, coughing, but Marcus yanked the rope again, pulling him under. This time he stayed down longer. By the time deputies hauled him back onto the dock, he was soaked, gasping, and stripped of the control he had worn so easily minutes before. Marcus was already gone, slipping away through the shallow water near the reeds, the rope coiled in his hand. Chief Randall Yates stood on the same dock where Marcus's sister had taken her last breath. His phone was pressed to his ear, his stance relaxed, like he owned the place. From the gravel pull-off, Marcus walked toward him, each step steady, boots crunching on the boards. Yates ended his call and turned, a smirk forming when he saw who it was. "Marcus Hale. Didn't expect you here," he said, his voice carrying that edge of mockery. Marcus stopped a few feet away, his eyes locked on the man's. "We both know why I'm here," he said quietly. The smirk faltered. Marcus moved fast, grabbing Yates by the front of his shirt and driving him backward toward the end of the dock. The phone skittered across the wood, sliding to the edge. Yates swung at him once, but Marcus didn't let go. They hit the water hard, the cold closing around them. Below the surface, Marcus locked his grip around Yates's collar, dragging him deeper. The sunlight fractured above them, thin and unreachable. Yates fought, kicking and clawing, but Marcus held on. He let him break the surface once for a single gulp of air, then forced him under again. This time, the struggle faded fast. Marcus let go, watching the body sink toward the lakebed before pulling himself back onto the dock. The phone lay cracked where it had stopped. He didn't touch it. The water was already smoothing over, erasing the moment, just like it had with his sister, but this time, Marcus knew it was done on his terms. The lake was quiet under the soft light of sunset, the surface glowing gold as the day faded. Marcus stood at the edge with a single white lily in his hand, the stem cool against his fingers. He crouched and set it gently on the water, watching it drift away on a small ripple. His reflection wavered beside it, broken by the movement of the lake. Behind him, footsteps crunched on the path. His mother came to stand next to him, her eyes on the water. "It's done, isn't it?" she asked. Marcus kept his gaze on the horizon and gave a single nod. "Yes." She placed her hand lightly on his, and they stood in silence, the last streaks of light slipping away. The lily floated farther out until it was just a pale speck, then disappeared into the darkening water. Marcus didn't need to search for it. He knew it was out there, moving free. The lake would always hold its secrets, but now some of them had been answered. Without another word, he turned toward the path, his mother walking beside him, their footsteps fading into the quiet evening.